Is work trauma as bad as we think? But let's get Dan Denisoff's opinion on this, and in part 2 of a conversation on this episode of Work Trauma, How Corporations Really Work. All right, I want to switch gears a little bit. We've talked about this once, and I think I had a podcast on it a few podcasts back. I really get aggravated when companies say, give your loyalty to us. And I think companies don't do enough to demand an employee's loyalty. Now, doesn't mean you shouldn't work hard for a company. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be proud of where you work. But to kind of demand this fealty sometimes really bothers me, because I believe by definition, a company is not loyal to the employees. And to your point from earlier, they're loyal to the owners, right? So the stockholders. So, but you hear so much about this. There's a lot of thought leader gurus types are like, oh yes, get their loyalty by tapping into their hearts and souls. And I don't know if you could talk about that, how you feel about that. And there's a story you told me a while back about somebody at Pepsi who was being let go. And there was an interesting conversation between, I think it was the plant director. But what's your take on that, just on loyalty and companies demanding loyalty?
Yeah, well, I don't buy that. And, again, I don't demand loyalty. It really, it's transactional, right? You do what you have to do, and I will pay you for it. Now, again, I want to create the best work environment possible. I want to treat you fairly. I want to reward you for doing good work. I'm not going to keep you if you're doing bad work. So I don't buy into that. And I don't buy into the fluff and back in the day. And I know what you're talking about. To me, this is more anxious. Back in the Pepsi day, every month there was a new binder, a new HR initiative, some kind of initiative. And, I used to do is you put the binder to the side and wait a few weeks. You can kind of wait it out. And it would pass. So I don't think that's realistic. And, and maybe years ago, when you hear like when people would go work at General Electric in Schenectady, New York, or, work at the steel mill where Rudy's father worked, you would be there for your whole career. The sons would go, literally in the 1970s, the half-life of a job was like about 40 years. So basically, most people started and finished at the same place. Right. The half-life now is like with some areas are like really months, but it's certainly within a few years. So you don't get loyalty. But I think what you do is you treat people fairly, and and as long as you're fair, it's transactional. Like I do as much for pay for performance as I can for employees. In other words, we'll pay you a nice, I'll reward you, but you're going to reward because you're going to earn it. But I've also been an advocate for employees.
Yes. Yeah, because you have to have a healthy work environment. There has to be some basic things. And again, you want employees to be, take pride in where they work, and you treat them well. I would imagine, my thought is people have loyalty to their managers. And you see this, right? When you see a really good manager go, often the whole team goes with them, even if it's for less money, because there's some loyalty there. But to a company, it's just crazy. And I love, because I use this a lot. When did transaction become such a dirty word? Because I think it's fair. You do a good job, we pay you fairly. You keep on learning, you're going to continue to have your job. And I feel like again, I kind of critical of a lot of the thought gurus out there. They're always like, no, we want it to be transformational and all this. Yes, I'm using a British accent for Simon Sinek. And it's just like, how about just treat people really well, pay them for what they deserve? Because at some point, we've all been on the side of this, right, where somebody says to you, hey, we're laying off 100 people. You're one of those 100 people. It's nothing personal. It's just business. And that says it's transactional.
It's really personal. There's nothing more personal than sending a person home without a job, right? Well, that's the gurus, again, and I don't buy into that, because I think I think culture. And culture is a little bit different. Like one thing I know about Ole Smoky, where we aren't the highest paying company, but like if you're in the 80th percentile and you got a good culture, people will stay for that. And we've seen that time and time again, where there are businesses around close to us that actually pay more per hour, but we pay enough that people can put food on their plate and they like the culture. So whatever it is that we created, and this precedes me, that people like to work for Ole Smoky. And that's a good thing, right? But again, at the end of the day, we had some cutbacks recently because, business is down. That's life.
Yeah. No, I love what you said that. I think the term, a lot of terms in business like strategy, what the heck does that mean? But culture is another one. It's kind of taking on from, again, from a lot of these gurus for the last 30 years, this kind of flowery weird thing. When culture is like, hey, do we, to me, by the way, culture personally, culture to me is like, where are people spending their time? Are they spending their time doing productive work at productive meetings, being treated fairly, versus are they in ridiculous meetings? Are they talking gossip all the time? That's to me is what culture, where you spend your time. And we've turned it into this flowery thing, like create this culture where people tap into their hearts and minds and souls.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah. That's
that's
not.
not
Yeah.
culture to me.
No,
I think that's a distraction when you have a really bad culture to pretend you have a good culture. I remember, I've told this story before at Luxottica. I first got there, they just did an employee engagement survey, and the biggest indice by far that was the worst scoring indice was trust and lack of transparency with the executive team. So their response was to spend $3 million on a culture program instead of looking at themselves and being a little bit more transparent
yeah.
and a little bit more open
The
about what's
answers are
going
there,
on.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and again, I think that for me, like where the cultures have been, where we generally speak, I'm here because I've always had a good team. So the culture I built started with the executive team, and then
Yeah.
to me, the culture is built around the process. And what I mean by that is, for me, when I run a plant, is I want to be best in class. So when we talk to people, we completely talk about using the word excellence, about not making mistakes, about doing things right. There's nothing about like we don't talk. Oh yeah, you're my family. You're my family. You're not my family. Work is not a family place. Work is a place where you go to work, and it's nice to have nice people. And it's nice to have a company picnic and this and that. But at the end of the day, if we all want to be here a few years from now, from an operations standpoint, our job is to be excellent. Our job is to reduce costs, improve quality, train
Right.
people, develop people, and that is the culture. But it's fun watching people when they start getting it. Like they're starting to see it now over here in Newport, Tennessee, where we're at. Where oh yeah, you leave work feeling good when you did well. There's a great book called The Game of Work by a guy named Chuck Coonrad. I make everybody read it.
I've read it.
And
For you.
again, it's the whole idea of like feeling like I accomplished something today while I was at work, whether it be a new production record, or I install new equipment, or I always tell people be the best damn floor sweeper there is, but do something, take it home with you. So that's my idea of the culture is all about like inspiring excellence in people to be. The other thing I just want to point real quick too is when you talk about the hourly people, and again you hear these experts about makes them happy. You know what makes them happy? Money makes them happy. They come. It's again, it's transactional, maybe a little bit like a mercenary. But the reason, like when you have expendable income, getting a trophy, getting a dinner, getting something, that's nice. But when you're trying to make ends meet, you're there to make money, right? Yeah. And that's really what it's about. So it's like people are like, oh geez, thanks for the barbecue, but can I get a raise? So you got to understand who your audience is, right?
You're killing me. I love it.
That's
instead of spending $2 million on a culture program, how about pay people a little better?
Exactly. Or take that money. Like what we do is like, so what I do, I've done this for a while now, is we have like a pay for performance program, and we have like I keep a balanced scorecard, and I found pretty much universally, at least in operations, it's 16 KPIs. And what we do with employees is, it's all math. And we tell them, like, we have 16 KPIs, and I can say, if we do all these right, I know how much money we'll save during the year. And we're going to give you some of that back. Okay. So every time you don't break a bottle, every time something doesn't go down the drain, every time you start to line up on time, we're saving money. And when we hit this money, we're going to give it to you. Okay. And that transactional, but it answers what's in it for me.
No, but that's exactly right. So what I love about it is you're living proof, which most companies don't do. You can say, hey, man, we're all about making money, making profit, being excellent, doing great, but I still can care about you at the same time. I don't have to have a separate program that is supposed to demonstrate that I care about you. I will just care about you.
Exactly.
I will pay you fairly. I'll expect great things from you, and I will coach you and take care of you. But I don't have to have a program to show that we have a culture that cares about you. How about just caring about you?
Yeah.
So I love it. All right. Yep. But Dan, I'm really looking for that one. Remember that Pepsi story you told me about the guy who was fired and he was kind of upset that he was fired because he gave so much to Pepsi. Can you remind me of that story?
Yeah. This is crazy. This is, again, I was in South Carolina then. So I was probably in my early 30s. Had been a manager for a little bit by then. And our boss, the plant manager, was a super nice guy. One of my mentors, super nice guy, super bright guy. And anyhow, we had to terminate one of the guys on the off shift. He just wasn't performing. He was a supervisor. He was a line supervisor. And he said, he goes, "I can't believe you're firing me. I lost my wife. I own my kids. And I'm going to lose my job. I gave everything up for Pepsi." And my boss looked at him and said, "Well, that was stupid." And it was like, wow. So I always kept that, because here's a really nice guy, really big heart. And at the end of the day, don't sell your soul for anybody. That was the moral of the story.
Well said.
Yeah, because and I know, Michael, you used to be with Covey, and one thing that I always share with my people now is that, and again, I do not expect people to work 90 hours a week. I expect people to work till the job's done. And, if you can't do your job in 40 or 50 hours, then you're probably not doing something right. Is that, Stephen Covey said, I think no man or woman on their deathbed ever wish they spent another hour at work. And so I try to, keep that in everybody's mind. I live that way now. I mean, I work hard, but I'm not selling my soul to the job.
No, I love that. But again, I think you're a pretty unique fella. And this is why I had you on the program, because you can be really hardcore about doing great work, but still have humanity. It's the faux humanity stuff, the faux stuff. I remember one time I was working at a company, which I won't give the name, and they treated us really poorly, and we were terribly underappreciated. And they gave us it was like The Bachelor, but this would have been in the 90s. They lined us up and they said, "We appreciate you," and they gave everybody a rose.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And how about pay us fairly and treat us nicely, and stop it with the Bachelorette Rose program. Anyway, right. Okay. So a couple more questions for you. Thanks for sharing that story. But I think that story of Pepsi is, you have to. I think one of the big purposes of the Work Trauma podcast is just to make sure it's not to really be cynical about corporations, so I just kind of unnaturally poo-poo them, right? One, because there are a lot of good people and some executives that are good, but it's just to make sure you know what the playing field is, what the game is, so you can make a decision about your career, your life, right? And about if you want to work there, if you want to do something different. But when you were constantly barraged like, "We care about you," you don't. And I've seen this a lot in organizations. Well, they'll have a big town hall. They'll have 60 slides, and the first 20 are finance, the next 20 are marketing, next 19 are operations, and the last slide is about people. And then they'll say, "Oh, people are our most important asset." Like, that don't look like it.
Yeah. So that's right. We were talking about, like I said earlier, my first slide was just about the people. I liken it, like I said, the one thing I did take from Pepsi like years ago, and we helped develop this program, was called Coaching and Leading. And that's where we started using talking about KPIs with people and feedback. And it wasn't fluffy. And I think again, I guess because I like sports, you like sports, but I think it's true is, if you look at the best, you want to look at the best leaders, look at the best coaches. So whether it's a Wooden, whether it's a Saban, whether Belichick, they all have different styles, right?
Lou Holtz,
right? The first thing to notice is they're all different. They're all individuals. So if you take think of a Tony Dungy and a Bill Belichick, two totally different personalities. One's fiery, and other guy's more cerebral, but they win. What do they do to win? And they expect excellence. They don't blow smoke, right? They have a certain level of patience, but they also have a very high level of impatience for mediocrity, right? Yeah. And I'll quote Saban on that. Saban said high performing people don't like being around mediocre people because it brings them down. Mediocre people don't like being around high performing people because it makes them look bad. Right. So what you have to do is move that out. And, pro football is probably the most, next to war, is probably the most brutal thing going, right? You make a lot of money, but the minute your knee's gone, nobody's coddling you. You're
Yeah.
gone. On to the next guy. And business. The reality is businesses are like that, and businesses have to be like that.
They have to
I
be
mean,
like that by definition. I
but
love
I
that.
mean, think about like in our lifetime, big companies that don't exist. Our mother, I was talking to her today, Sears isn't here, on the retail level. Sears not here, Kmart's not here, JCPenney's not here, Montgomery Ward's not. I mean, you could list like probably a
Yeah.
dozen major are just gone. They don't like what happened to Blockbuster doesn't exist. The car companies are by nature. It's a brutal existence to keep a company going, and with
Yeah.
technology, it gets harder all the time. So I think you're right. I think blowing smoke doesn't do anything. I think honesty,
Yeah.
and understanding what people really want. Managers, I think, and people kind of what we do. We want, of course, we like making money, but we are, the recognition and the ability to, kind of to see places. That's important to us. But to the working man and woman that's on a production line, right, or at a desk, they want to be treated fairly. They want to have a decent paycheck to go home. They want to go home to their family and do what they do, right? Our dad was like.
Yeah. No, you've been always really keen on that. I think you're really in tune to particularly the frontline blue collar worker. They want to have enough money, have a decent home, have a nice vacation at least once a year, and enjoy themselves, on the weekend watching a football game, but not always being stressed about money. So that's brilliant. All right. So you should know this. So one of the thesis of work trauma is that I think you have a lot of really great leaders. They move up, but then they kind of make it to your level, like the SVP level. And instead of staying to be a great leader, I believe there's a good number of them that stop being great leaders and start thinking, holy cow, I'm making all this money. My kids' private school is paid for. I have deferred compensation. I'm going to be less thinking about being a great leader, even though that's the best way to maintain it. And I'm going to be thinking about how do I keep this? How do I preserve and protect this? So my question is with that thesis, well, you can tell me if you buy it or not, or to what degree you buy it, but how is it as an executive working with other executives who might not see the world the way you do, or who are into blowing the smoke, or who are just only about taking care of themselves? I know you've had a few of those in your lives because you told me you have, but what's that like working with those leaders, and how do you kind of keep yourself sane and make that work all the same?
Well, there have been a few, but there have been far between. So I mean, generally, but how I do it again is I've matured. I used to try to go toe to toe with them, and there's a saying: when you wrestle with a pig, you both get dirty, and only one of you like it. So now I deal with it. I pick my battles. With these folks, if that's the way they want to be, then so be it. And they don't last. You can't. It's not a sustainable. I mean, the half-life. At least the companies I work for. I mean. Being on an executive committee is not typically a lifelong endeavor. You only have a shelf, especially if you're like in marketing or sales. Your shelf life's usually only a few years. I guess it's anytime I've had a deal, it's been a case by case basis. Most of the I've dealt with big egos, right? And again, but typically you don't become a leader unless you have some kind of ego.
Yeah.
You have to be able to, at the end of the day, the buck stops with us, right?
Yeah, but where's that line? I totally agree with that. Like I said, this is kind of like you have to have big shoulders. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have confidence. It's like if I went to get brain surgery and the brain surgeon said, "Oh, I'm okay at what I do." I don't want that guy kind of in my brain.
Well, you got to be
Top
Gun, right? You got to be a Top Gun. All the pilots, right?
You got to be Top Gun. But where does that cross from like, hey, I have to have a strong id, a strong ego, and a high level of confidence too? I'm gonna just solely worry about myself, because there is a line there. I just feel like there's a line there, and I think now that I'm old, like I could see where people cross that line pretty easily.
Yeah, well, when they do, again, it's because I always use an example. Of a bicycle gears, as what happens with the big wheel, which is us executives, is up here, and the little wheel in the back is the people who do the work, the performer. When that big wheel moves just a little bit, that little wheel spins like this, right? It goes crazy. So when the big wheel is out of kilter or doing something, I have never seen it last too long, because if they don't have their A game. If you got a professional, I guess it would be different. It was a CEO, and I have not seen that with a CEO.
Okay.
They don't last very long because it's apparent to everybody, right? You can't hide that.
That's true.
So
Okay, so here's my
they
only
don't usually
pushback
last.
to it. Here's my only pushback. I think that's a fair statement, but they last long enough that there's a good deal of collateral damage that goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. A bad manager, a bad leader can really cause lose good people, hire bad people. Cost the company money, can cost the company their reputation. I mean, look at Cracker Barrel, look at Bud Light. People made these decisions, and you're just wondering like, well, who are they listening to? And I'm not, I'm not getting political over at this at all, but like, who the Cracker Barrel consumer is. The Cracker Barrel consumer are the same people that come to, where I work, Ole Smoky. We're middle America. They come to Gatlinburg, they go to see Dollywood, and they loved Uncle Herschel. Sitting by today, and then you paint it white and you change a little pegboard. It's not offensive to people who can't do it. I don't know if you do that. They actually took the words off the pegboard.
No, I thought I told you, but yes, they said because I think if you like only got down to 5 pegs, it's like you're ignorant. And now if you get down to 5 pegs only, it's like keep trying harder.
No.
Yeah.
So those are the people that are most dangerous. But again, that was not made in a vacuum. I think Bud Light was. I think the Bud Light thing kind of took the lights out of it all because if you know the whole story, there was only a few scans supposed to be made.
We've talked about it, yes.
But Cracker Barrel, obviously the CEO, is responsible, but her whole executive committee said, "Oh yeah, Bob, that's a great idea," and the whole board of directors said, "Yeah, that's a great idea," and then some really expensive consulting firm said, "Yeah, here's all the data that supports this great idea," and now it's not a great idea. How that happened, I don't know.
It's crazy. It's great. It's so amazing. You might want to check out my previous podcast about that. So 2 more questions real quick.
I'm absolutely going to do that tonight when we hang
I'm sending you the link. You have no choice. Or we're not having Thanksgiving together. All right, 2 more questions real quick. One is, so our mother, Mama Gloria, she always has a lot of great Italian sayings. And one I tend to use a lot is that the fish rots from the head down. How do you feel about that in terms of business?
Oh, absolutely. A business can't, absolutely. I mean, you cannot outperform your leadership, right? I mean, you just can't. You can do everything you can, but if you got a bad boss, or a bad department head, you just can't outperform. I had one. I'll give you this was like the worst boss I ever had was when I was in when I came to Knoxville the first time back in 1991. And I was just a production supervisor or maybe a production man, whatever. But the guy that was in charge there, he measured success by how many hours he worked. And he would literally be there sometimes 24 hours out of time, right? Doing crazy stuff. I mean, now they know. You knew then it was crazy. Even now, I really know how crazy it was. And he hated when his employees got a recognition. If you were doing good, he would try to hurt you, right? He would do just the opposite.
Wow.
And I guess I learned from him I don't want to be like him, so I'll do the opposite. Like, to me, I would feel like if you work for me and you do good, that's great for you. It also makes me look good, right? And he was just the opposite. And so as long as he was there, dysfunction reigned because anybody, when his supervisors, and you remember these guys, Phil, and I don't know if you ever met Taya, but they were all good guys. We all ended up having great careers. And he could have been a hero because he had a bunch of good people working for him, and he tried to destroy all of us. And he ended up, eventually they moved him on, and then I think I took over, and things started turning. And it wasn't really that hard. And it wasn't that hard to turn once you got rid of the cancer, right? I know the manager leader archetype you're describing. It's awful and it's terrible. But when you're in it, man, it spins you unless you're really grounded. Yeah, you can't. But you can't like you can't have a national championship football team without a high quality caliber coach. I mean, think of one university. Again, because we love our college ball. Going back as long as you can remember, where the coach, whether it was Holtz or Saban or Paterno or Kirby Smart, or you go through the list, and they were great coaches. They were maybe not the greatest coach, but all of them were great coaches.
I'm going to steal your quote. You cannot perform your leadership. I'm going to steal that for now on. Pretend it's mine because I think you owe me. No,
You
that's
know me.
awesome.
That's
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. Okay, last question. But I think you've answered a lot of this. So I know it might feel a little redundant, but all the same. So, you're into the senior part of your career. I mean, you still have a lot of good years in you, but what would you tell your 20 something self starting off the career that, what do you know now? And I think you've mentioned quite a few things because you mentioned like, hey, now I would do it like this way. But what would you tell your 25-year-old self who's starting off in the career? What are some nuggets advice you would give yourself?
okay. Well, first of all, I'm not sure I would have had a choice or not because of the culture at Pepsi at the time and in the time I lived.
Right.
It did. I probably worked too much, and I gave up. Like in my late 20s and my early 30s, I gave up a lot. Maybe,
Yeah.
or maybe because I did that, it's why I'm
Point.
successful later. Right? Again,
Yep.
anything you want to. Success very rarely happens to people that don't work hard. Right. I'm a true believer in that. It's like some there might be a nepo baby or this or here, but I think most people who get into into a man leadership position or are successful, they did it because they worked hard.
Okay.
So I would say I don't know, but I would have maybe had a little more balance. I would have a little bit smarter on the balance. The other thing I would have done, like where my biggest mistakes were, or I probably talked too much, although I'm talking a lot now, is I should have listened more.
Okay.
And that's a big thing. Now I've learned I can sit through a whole meeting and not say a word and let everybody talk, and then I kind of
Yeah.
take it all in, and then make a more informed decision. So they say 2 ears, 1 mouth. So
Yeah.
I try to follow that now. Where I think the biggest thing is listening better, because when you're young and you're aggressive and you just come back
Yep.
from a training, or you know everything, more
Yep.
than your boss does, more than your boss's boss does, and you
Yep.
don't listen. So that would probably be
And by the way, even if you're right, if you talk too much, you kind of become white noise. Even if you're right, people
yeah.
tune you out a bit.
Yeah. So that's probably one of the things I remember. In fact, probably one of my humbling moments was I think I was at a Pepsi. It was seminar, a Pepsi training course, and the guy told me I talked too much one day, a facilitator, and it stuck with me
Yeah.
my whole life. And I was like, oh my god, I thought I was being smart. I thought I was telling him how much I knew, and I was just probably being annoying. And so it was from that moment on that I learned not to talk as much.
That's beautiful. But that's beautiful. That's beautiful self-awareness. A lot of people are told they're annoying because they talk too much, and they do it the next 50 years of their life. So that's pretty impressive and pretty unique as well. Well, listen, I knew this was going to be good. I wasn't worried about it at all because the whole point of this podcast really, again, it's just to talk honestly and authentically about how business works. Again, not just to trash it because there's no value in that, but to talk honestly about the things that can be better and some of the things we should do more of. And so again, so people can make the best decisions about their lives. So I think we accomplished that. You were particularly awesome, and I do really appreciate it. And yeah, is there any final thoughts or words of wisdom you like to share? No. You
I'll
said
take
it
my
all. No,
own
I think
advice. No.
but that's about no. I think it was good, and I really appreciate it. And I think I know myself and the listeners will really appreciate just the honesty about it. And I think I wish more businesses. You said it earlier. I wish more businesses would just be honest about how things really work, honest how they want to treat their people. Stop with the fluff and the programs and the distractions, and just do the business and be honest with your folks, because that's really a
Yeah.
great way to build culture, just through sheer honesty.
Yeah,
It's
one
a
other
great
thing
place
I
to
was
start.
thinking, I just thought of now, like when you think
Yeah.
about because I have been you look back at my career, is I've always been put into plants that need like
Turn around.
drastic change. Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say my strength is getting to Six Sigma. My strength is like taking something that's on fire and making it a very good plant. And we did make, again, like Atlanta, we won, I'm proud of that. We won best plant in North America. But again, but the one thing that I found helpful as I grew. So when and I may have been this guy to the bosses who mentored me, was you always need one person with you that shares the same vision that you do. Because what happens is when you're in a loony bin and you walk into these places and you got to turn around, and everybody thinks that they're right, and you're the outsider. You need that one person that at the end of the day, you have a cup of coffee, or you go down to the corner bar and you have a beer and say, am I freaking crazy or what? And they've got to tell you, no, you're not crazy. They invite, you're here for a reason. We're here for a reason to change this, because I would recommend it for anybody. It's like, as soon as you get into a position, which I did, like when I took Ole Smoky, it was pretty rough. And by the grace of God, a guy that we've been crossing each other's paths at a bunch of different companies over 30 years, he happened to be available. And I started in December, and he was here from Arizona on January 1st. He started, and
wow,
just the two of us, like we knew because experience helps. We knew exactly what needed to be done, and no matter what anybody said, well, that's not how we do it around here, or that's not going to fly here, or you got to do. We just said no. We didn't ask for permission. We knew what we had to do, and you had that person like, is this right? And we're like, yeah, it is. Hell yeah, it is. Because everybody else telling you you're wrong. So you do need that sounding board, that nice. and that ally that will. Otherwise, really, no man is an island. So
excellent. Well, great. I appreciate it. Well, this wraps up this episode of Work Trauma: How Corporations Really Work with Dan Denisoff. Dan, you've been great. Thank you so much for your time. Stay tuned for a future episode of Work Trauma, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Take care, Michael.
Thank you.
Bye.